I'm just gonna say it, most of your music is just not interesting enough to carry these runtimes. It's probably my most common complaint of new albums, so today I thought I'd share 10 albums that do have what it takes to keep things interesting for over an hour. And we're starting with Opeth and Blackwater Park. There's a reason why Opeth became one of the premier progressive death metal bands and even achieved some mainstream success in the process. Ackerfeld is an incredible songwriter with a clear knack for dynamics and pacing that are artistic and intricate while still appealing to a broad audience. And I can think of no better example than this seminal album that Rolling Stone named number 55 on their 100 greatest metal albums of all time. I'd call it fairly unusual for an hour and 8-minute progressive opus to achieve such acclaim that even more so-called normie metal listeners would be aware of it. But leave it to Ackerfeld with the help of the legendary Steven Wilson to craft an experience that is still just as satisfying to this day.
Don't waste my motherfucking time!
Something a little bit newer on this list though is Warforged with Voice. On a similar but lesser known note, this Chicago band came seemingly out of nowhere to deliver not only one of the best albums of 2019, but one that I named in my top 100 albums of the entire decade. And at an hour and 13 minutes long, this record could seem daunting at first, but the meticulous attention to detail, uniting clear influences of everything from the aforementioned Opeth to Obscura, has me absolutely at the edge of my seat every time I listen. And it never feels long. In fact, every time I revisit it, it's as though I'm stepping into some interstellar style world where time functions at a completely different rate. The atmosphere is every bit as engrossing as Blackwater Park's, and to be honest, the level of technicality on display gives much bigger bands a run for their money.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Then we have 9 Inch Nails with The Fragile. Now, in general, I hate double albums. In my opinion, most bands who attempt them don't have nearly enough to say. And as a result, there are only a handful I can name that actually warrant the time investment, and this is most definitely at the top of that list for me. In fact, as much as I love the Downward Spiral, I would go so far as to call this Trent's true magnum opus. Over an hour and 44 minutes, we're taken on a journey through such an incredible variety of soundscapes, from the trademark ascending guitar hook and infectious beats of Somewhat Damaged, to the final haunting notes of Ripe with Decay. And yet it all flows together so seamlessly without a single dud to show for it. I could hear any one of these 23 songs and it would just make me want to play the whole thing all over again.
Perfection.
Next up is Panopticon with Autumn Eternal. I didn't even realize this album was over an hour until someone suggested it again in the comments, because frankly, it breezes by in what feels like 40 or so minutes. Austin really captured people's imaginations with his fusion of black metal with Appalachian folk, and while the latter influences are much more subtle here, I am no less caught up in the atmosphere and emotion. Not only does it totally capture the vibe of my Pacific Northwestern surroundings, its themes around maturing into adulthood really resonated with me when it came out and only pull at my heartstrings even harder with each re-listen.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Then we have Periphery with Periphery IV. Another case where, despite listening to these albums for over a decade now, I never even realized that they're all actually over an hour long. But ultimately, I chose this one as it does really feel like a culmination of everything that came before it. And from a band so big that they could rest on their laurels and just coast, but instead chose to continue to push themselves into new and challenging territory with the nearly 17-minute opening track Reptile. I actually saw them perform this live and it was just as flawless. But regardless, the entire album is another perfect balance of those more complex and progressive elements, softer fare like It's Only Smiles, and straight to the pit ragers like Church Burner. I know some people bemoan this band for either helping to kick off the gent trend or the love or hate them vocals, but you can't deny their talent as songwriters and performers, and once more bringing complexity and technicality to a mainstream audience.
Ooh, you smell that? It smells like someone's wrong, and it's not me.
Next up is Soilwork with The Living Infinite. I kind of fell off of Soilwork in the late 2000s, so it actually wasn't until recently for my discography tier list and deep dive that I finally listened to this release. Instantly added to that previously mentioned list of fantastic double albums. At around an hour and 24 minutes, this is easily the best thing has done in their later career, and proof that this Gothenburg death metal band are also more than capable of getting progressive. Especially after dipping into the more kind of rock-influenced territory of the likes of Stabbing the Drama, it's always great to see a band change course and deliver some of their best work 15 plus years into their career, and Bjorn's vocals sound better than ever when backed by these lush compositions. Then we have Schammasch with Triangle. Forget double albums, how about a triple album?
I need an adult!
When I initially saw this 1 hour and 41 minute runtime, I was pretty skeptical, but back in 2016, this quickly became one of my favorite underground black metal albums of all time, and it's easily their best work so far. There are tracks like the haunting Metanoia, which remind me of Blue Das Nor's Cosmosophy trilogy, and others like In Dialogue with Death that are sort of a behemoth energy. It's a wonderful, spellbinding tumble into the abyss, capped off by a third act that is fully ambient. And while that last section may not be my favorite part, it still acts as an appropriate conclusion worth sitting through. A truly cathartic experience from start to finish.
Hold on to your butts.
Then we have Between the Buried and Me with Colors and Colors 2. I'm cheating a little bit here as I think either of these albums could fit on this list, but honestly, despite my longtime love of the original, I'm kind of leaning towards the sequel at this point for just how much ground it manages to cover.
How dare you!
An hour and 19 minutes just brimming with creativity for an album that could easily become chaos in anyone else's hands. In addition to the obvious influences of the likes of Rush and Dream Theater, there's elements of 80s synth pop, circus performance, folk, and so much more. Not to mention one of the best drum solos of all time on Fix the Error, which I also had the honor of seeing performed live. Not everyone loved it, but even in spite of its length, this was probably my most listened to album of 2021.
Just hook it to my veins!
Then we have Tool with Lateralus. I could also go with Anima, but I think that Lateralus is the more cohesive piece of the two. And to be real, I actually tried to avoid including Tool on this list altogether as it feels kind of obvious. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why even more so than Opeth, this band became one of the most played bands on the radio in 2001. Like, say what you will about this band, but seriously think of what an achievement that is. And for just how many people this probably acted as a gateway to even more wild and complex progressive music and metal in general. You can bemoan the more mainstream packaging, but I'd argue that it's actually harder to write music that balances both worlds so well.
Cope!
And then we have Gojira with From Mars to Sirius. Another band where you could choose any number of their albums, but I had to go with the OG that would be the inspiration of thousands of bands going forwards. There's obviously a trend towards progressive albums on this list, and there's a reason why that style just lends itself better to longer works. Rather than just repeating the same verse and chorus ad nauseum, these tracks take you through a constantly evolving landscape, and while still going hard as fuck. You've got ridiculous banger moments like the heaviest matter in the universe, but also introspective drifters like Flying Whales. Pummeling mathy drumming, seamlessly endless hooks, and engaging vocals all make this a powerful experience worth having and without even a single ounce of filler. Y'all check out this playlist for my most underrated metal bands and let me know your other favorite long metal albums in the comments. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.